Good morning. Welcome back, students. This is the second class of the summary of the story A Rose for Emily. Yesterday I have given you the summary of first three sections. In today's class, we are going to deal with section 4 and 5. As you are all aware, in section 3, first, second and third, we have discussed the death of Emily, what happens after her death. In the second section, we deal with the death of Emily's father, and why was Emily left alone? Because all the suitors were rejected by the father. And in section 3, we are introduced to another character of the story, Homer Barron, who is a Yankee and is supposed to have an affair with Emily Greason. Section 3 finishes with Emily Greason going to the market and purchasing poison for her. Now we begin with the summary of section 4. In section 4, the narrator describes the fear that some of the townspeople have that Emily will use the poison to kill herself. Her potential marriage to Homer seems increasingly unlikely, despite the continued Sunday ritual. The town people also remarked, quote, "He liked men, and it was known that he drank with the younger men in the Elks Club, that he was not a marrying man," unquote. The more outraged women of the town insist that the Baptist minister talk with Emily. After his visit to Emily's place, he never speaks of what happened and swears that he will never go back. So the minister's wife writes to Emily's two cousins in Alabama, who arrive for an extended stay. Because Emily orders a silver toilet set, monogrammed with the initials HB, the talk of the couple's marriage resumes. Homer, absent from town, is believed to be preparing for Emily's move to the north or avoiding Emily's intrusive relatives. After the cousins' departure, Homer enters the Greason home one evening and then is never seen again. Holed up in the house, Emily grows plump and grey. Despite the occasional lesson she gives in china painting, her door remains closed to outsiders. In what becomes an annual ritual, Emily refuses to acknowledge the tax bill. She eventually closes up the top floor of the house. Except for the occasional glimpse of her in the window, nothing is heard from her until her death at age 74. Only the servant is seen going in and out of the house. To quote from the text, "She died in one of the downstairs rooms in a heavy walnut bed with a curtain, her grey head propped on a pillow yellow and moldy with age and lack of sunlight." So students, in section 4, we are made aware of the fact that Homer Barron and Emily Greason are about to marry, and the happenings that are going on between the two is the talk of the town. People have started talking that probably Homer Barron, when he takes a leave from the town, they believe that he has gone to prepare for Emily's homecoming. After disappearing for a few days, he comes back again. And when he comes back again, he is seen entering the house of Emily Greason. And after that, nobody sees him coming out. What happens to Homer Barron is a mystery. People do not know what happened between Emily Greason and Homer Barron. But the fact lies is that nobody sees Homer Barron after this particular section. Meanwhile, while Homer Barron is disappeared, he is not seen again. There's no trace of Homer Barron. There are few changes which happen in Emily Greason. She prefers to stay indoors. She doesn't prefer to go out. She earlier also was not interacting with people, and now she has just closed her doors and she doesn't venture out. So in section 4, we are made aware that everything between Homer Barron and Emily Greason is a closed door affair, and nobody knows what's happened between the two. In section 5, the climax of the story unveils. In the last section, the narrator describes what happens after Emily dies. Emily's body is laid out in the parlor, and the women town elders and two cousins attend the service. After some time has passed, the door to a sealed upstairs room that had not been opened in 40 years is broken down by the townspeople. The room is frozen in time, with items for an upcoming wedding and a man's suit laid out. Homer Barron's body is stretched on the bed as well, in an advanced state of decay. The onlookers then notice the indentation of a head in the pillow beside Homer's body and a long strand of Emily Gray's hair on the pillow. To quote from the text, a description of the room. A thin, acrid pall as of the tomb seemed to lie everywhere upon this room, decked and furnished as for a bridal. Upon the vallecy curtains of faded rose color, upon the rose-shaded lights, upon the dressing table, upon the delicate array of crystal and the man's toilet things backed with tarnished silver so tarnished that the monogram was obscured. Among them lay a collar and tie as if it had just been removed, which left upon the surface a pale crescent in the dust. Upon a chair hung the suit, carefully folded. Beneath it the two mute shoes and the discarded socks. These lines from the text describe the room in which Homer Barron was seen last. The items were arranged in the room as if it was a bridal room. The shoes of Homer Barron and the discarded socks, everything was there in place. Further, the writer explains, the man himself lay in the bed. So Homer Barron had been dead long back. For years, Emily Greason had kept the body inside her house. Further, the writer explains that when you look at the body of Homer Barron, we can just see what was left of him. Rotted beneath what was left of the nightshirt had become inextricable from the bed in which he lay. And the writer explains, and upon him and upon the pillow beside him lay that even coating of the patient and biting dust. Then we noticed that in the second pillow was an indentation of a head. One of us lifted something from it, and leaning forward in that faint and invisible dust, dry and acrid in the nostrils, we saw a long strand of iron grey hair. The ending of the story emphasizes the length of time Miss Emily must have slept with her dead lover, long enough for the town people to find that long strand of iron grey hair which was lying on the pillow next to the body of Homer Barron. Although our first reaction to the short story might be one of horror or disgust, Faulkner uses two literary techniques to create a seamless whole that makes the tale too intriguing to stop reading. The suspenseful, jumbled chronology of events and the narrator's shifting point of view, which emphasizes Miss Emily's strength of purpose, her aloofness and her pride, and lessens the horror and the repulsion of her action. One thing that should be kept into mind while reading the story is that the narrator, as explained by the critics, has shifted the time frame and the chronology of the story. Never in the story does one feel anything against Emily. Probably the readers sympathize with Emily in the story, and this credit goes to the narrator for portraying the character of Emily Greason in such a way that we do not hate her, but in fact we feel pity for her at the end of the story. As far as the narration of the story is concerned, the narrator uses we, as though speaking for the entire town, to be young, impressionable and male. The narrator is sympathetic to Miss Emily, never condemning her actions, sometimes unabashedly and sometimes grudgingly. The narrator admires her ability to use her aristocratic bearing in order to vanquish the members of the city council or to buy poison. The narrator also admires her aristocratic aloofness, especially in her disdain of such common matters as paying taxes or associating with lower class people. Ironically, the narrator admires Miss Emily's high and mighty bearing as she distances herself from the gross, vulgar, and teeming world, even while committing one of the ultimate acts of desperation, necrophilia with a low-life Yankee. In the end, we can just say, by using the we narrator, Faulkner creates a sense of closeness between readers and his story. As we all know, when we read the bio note of William Faulkner, that he has been a master storyteller. And there could be no better story than A Rose for Emily, which catches the reader's attention right from section 1. Moving from section 1 to section 5, we are totally into the story, and each section offers a new perspective to the story. The end of the story is indeed, which must have appeared during the early readings of the section is going to be tragic, but the narrator and the writer make the story so interesting and intriguing that we are not ready to put ourselves until and unless we finish the story. I think that's the art of a great story. So, dear students, we have finished with the summary of A Rose for Emily, which happens to be a little complicated story in terms of the kind of material, the content which the writer has taken, and in the terms of the diction and the vocabulary that the writer has employed. But it remains an interesting story. So, for tomorrow's class, we'll pick up another story for discussion. And thank you so much for this much. Thank you, students.